a memory left behind. And I just know that when you go, I'll be lonely one more time.
So from Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, for the last generation,
I'm
you have a choice.
BetaMortal.com, the Republican
I
candidate
did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations with
And I
that
realized
woman.
that this is something
Miss
he
Lewinsky.
is
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, good morning, Cleveland. Want to welcome everyone back this morning with Franklin Chansey and John Stanberry and our group here at Whoop Radio. I want to start out by thanking everyone. I was out last week. I had an emergency with my mom. I got several people that sent texts and emails to me, called, and I just want to tell everybody I appreciate it. She's doing much better, and she's back at home right now, so that's good.
That's great news.
You know, Mark Grissom, I saw last night in the papers doing his Whoop-a-thon again, and it's for Alzheimer's. And, you know, my mother, I'm sure she's got Alzheimer's. I guess that's the way this works, isn't it, John? It starts out as dementia and then works on into Alzheimer's. Or?
You know, I'll be honest with you. Those titles get really misused. The doctors don't know a lot about a lot of this stuff, and some of it's aging, some of it's Alzheimer's, some of it, you know, Parkinson's can cause some dementia issues. It's just sad. No matter what you call it, it's sad and it's tough for a family.
I've seen my mom. She's got dementia, and I see it getting worse and worse. And I've read articles that at some point in time it just basically turns into Alzheimer's. So I'm still trying to learn the disease myself.
Went through the same process with my dad, and it's certainly a hard thing to watch, and it's not what you look forward to. Heart goes out to you about that one.
Well, I appreciate it. She's doing better. That's all I can ask for right now. She's living in assisted living now, and she's comfortable, so that's what counts.
Good.
Last week I missed the show, but let's talk about there's a new sheriff in town. I've been hearing all about the new sheriff in town. What's your opinion of the start of the new sheriffing, Franklin?
I think that Sheriff Watson has made a good decision to reach back over lots of different administrations, in some cases different political parties, to try to pull together a coalition of folks that generally are well regarded in the community, and I think that's an optimistic start.
Great.
I commend him for that approach.
He'll get things done. There's no doubt about it. John, your opinion?
Well, I don't think you can find anything really to fault with the way they've done this. They've been very methodical about it. I said early on, Brian Smith was an excellent choice. I don't think you could have found anywhere in the country a better choice for the chief deputy's position, with Brian's experience, his ability to talk to people and get along with people. He's not new to the department. He's worked in the sheriff's department before, but he spent the bulk of his time at the city. So there'll be some getting to know each other going on. But Brian's a solid, down-to-earth person and a good lawman and a good politician, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that he knows how the system works, and I think he'll be able to do it. One thing, and I don't know the details of this, but I know that the men on the starting line have received a pretty substantial pay increase already, because one of the campaign themes was that there was too many top-heavy administration positions, and I think some of the big positions that had a pretty big salary line item were eliminated, and that money, from what I understand, is being distributed back to the guys on the bottom end. And we've talked about this before. Lisa and I were talking about this. The county over the last several years has given 3% across the board pay raises. Well, at the same time, they're arguing about the discrepancy between the entry salaries and the top end. Well, if you give a 3% across the board, if someone's making $75,000 a year, they get a whole lot more than than a deputy making $26,000
right.
a year. So we've always said that if you're going to give a pay raise, you should give a lower, if not maybe don't give one to someone making over 60, 70,000 and give more to the bottom end. And it looks like that's one of the things that Sheriff Watson has instituted, and I think it's a good move.
Okay. I think he'll do a great job. There'll be some new things going on around town, I'm sure. Be exciting. Eric, he'll do a fine job. We also had a policeman reinstated to the city police staff. What's your opinion of this, Franklin?
I'm glad to see Officer Tyson reinstated. The process was awfully messy, probably not the way the system's intended to work. As a general rule, you don't want the council micromanaging personnel decisions. It's not really their job. The whole idea is for them to set policy as opposed to do day-to-day management. And I think that it's kind of a slippery slope sometimes, that they should be very careful about not venturing down too often. I think it's a circumstance where the outcome that was going to happen was probably unfair to Officer Tyson, although, in fairness, there was a policy in place, and at least as I understand it, that policy was being followed, and that was what was leading to the result. So I think that
give me the bottom line of what happened here.
They had a policy in place, and they picked and chose who they enforced it on and who they didn't.
Well,
there were people who had just as serious of problems in whether it was the city police or it was the city fire department that gave an explanation, and they gave some leniency on that explanation. In his case, they gave no leniency.
And I think there's some merit to what John just said. What actually transpired is that the officer has a long-term history of having kidney stones, which is very painful.
And a long-term history of absolutely no problems in the department.
Agreed.
Yeah, I've heard he was a good officer.
Top notch.
He had a kidney stone attack, and he had a family member who had a pain pill, a prescription pain pill, left over, and shared it one with him.
And he informed them that he had taken that.
Well, that's where part of the problem arises. Yeah. The next day, he went to work and was selected for a random drug screen. There was nobody knew that was going to happen or anything. And he did not inform them prior to that he had this in his system. And under their policy, had he done that, that actually wouldn't have been a problem. Mm-hmm. The failure to do it became a problem. He failed that test for obvious reasons. That raises a whole host of issues if you think about it as a police officer. It's a medication you don't have a prescription for.
Would any of those issues be addressed in, say, a polygraph test?
Well, that's it. That's the next step. He did take a polygraph test, although technically speaking, and we are being technical here, but the act of sharing that prescription medication is actually a crime.
That's true.
That's the issue in this case. And he passed the polygraph, in other words, which confirmed that what he said happened actually happened.
And was that shared with anybody, the polygraph test?
Well, I knew about it.
I know, but the city council, were they given access to that?
Yes, they were told that, yeah. The city personnel manual for officers has a series of infractions in it that are sort of like Class A, Class B, Class C. This fell into the Class A category, which is the more serious version. And under that, traditionally, what's supposed to happen is sometimes some stark consequences. John's right. There have been exceptions made in the past for some of the officers.
From what I heard, there was exceptions made within the last couple of months.
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm not saying you're wrong, or I don't know. So when you look at the situation, what happened to this officer with his 27-year service record and so forth, it seems unfair.
Which also we have to say, the taxpayer has an investment in this officer.
Sure.
27 years of experience is 27 years of taxpayer-funded education and training, and from all reports, he was an exemplary officer.
I agree with you. I agree
and no
with
one's
you.
arguing that there shouldn't have been punishment. That's not the point here. The point is the punishment seemed excessive, especially compared to punishment meted out to other individuals in similar situations.
Well, obviously it worked out through, I guess, an appeal process. Is this the way it happened?
Franklin's
No,
right.
it was
We
not.
should be scared of
Yeah.
a city council that routinely meddles in this, and they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, you can't take that reticence to interfere and allow the departments to run roughshod.
Actually, the council has no authority to make this decision
Right.
under the charter. What they did was go in and make an expression of policy, and then state that they thought that the city ought to reinstate him in exchange for a signed release of any liability, which may not have existed anyway. But that's the way they approached it. And consequently, the city manager then reinstated him under those circumstances. The appeal process actually hadn't even been completed as of the time that the council took this position.
They never had the appeal.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, he's back at work. Is that right?
I would assume
From
he
what
is
I
back.
understand.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good.
I saw the council also, again, in a very messy way, I think probably finally got to the correct position with the way they handled the salary increase for the mayor.
Well, I disagree. I don't think there was any increase required or necessary.
Not required. I agree with it's not that it's required, but there's nothing wrong with reviewing salaries from time to time and looking at what is being
It
paid
was
for
more
what's
than doubled.
Yeah.
How many
Well, it
people?
was doubled exactly.
Well, folks, how many of you in the listening area have seen your income doubled in 1 year in the last, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years of economic downturn?
Now, if you'd been volunteering your time all these years, it wouldn't be a bad thing.
Well, I mean, by the way, folks, you all have
Mayor
seen,
Rowland has volunteered.
this has
time.
nothing. See, that's the part that bothers me about all these kinds of discussions.
I know.
We always want to personalize
Money's
them,
money.
so anybody who opposes them is a bad guy. Mayor Rowland is exemplary in the job that he does, and he is exemplary in the effort that
I play
he makes.
devil's advocate here.
I understand,
well-
but that has nothing to do with whether in an economic downturn, as we've been living through for the past 5 or 6 years, when people are struggling to pay their taxes that the city operates on, that you double someone's salary.
What my interest was is in making sure that the mayoral position remains a part-time position. And I was concerned with the pay increases that they were talking about initially, that they were really transferring it into a full-time job.
Well,
Which
you
I
helped
don't
write
think
the
was a good
charter.
thing.
Is there a legal way for them to transition it into a full-time job?
No, well, not in terms of responsibility without modifying the charter, without modifying the charter, but they could, in theory, they could establish any salary they want to for it and make it into effectively a full-time job. What I'm saying is the mayoral position is not intended to be a full-time job. It's supposed to be a part-time
Based
position.
on the charter that you helped write.
That's correct. Yeah.
What-
Well,
what
maybe
is-
they've just learned from the president. He's not obligated to abide by the U.S. Constitution, so why should a city council be obligated to abide by a charter?
Ooh, nice segue. Probably been planning that one for days.
No, just the last minute or two.
I want to ask another question before we get off in this kind of stuff. Common Core. There was a large article in the Banner, I think yesterday, about the Common Core where they spoke to the Rotary. It was the Sunrise Rotary. It wasn't the Rotary you attend, right?
Right.
Anyway, I'm trying to figure out Common Core. Common Core is basically, from reading the article, is trying to get the kids ready for the future, and they don't know what the future is. So that's basically the way I read the article. In 2027, a kid starting kindergarten now, they're trying to figure out what to teach them so they'll be ready for 2027.
The theory behind Common Core is that it's not a new thing. It's a 20-year-old concept that we needed to have a certain series of national benchmarks that kids, no matter where you go to school, ought to have mastered by the time you get out of school. Number one. Number two, it does not establish a particular curriculum. Different states and different communities can come up with their own curriculum
within their parameters.
Well,
so it does establish a national curriculum.
Well, it doesn't say you have to use this textbook.
No, but it says you got to cover this, you have to cover that.
But you ought to be able to master these topics by the time you graduate.
Well, you know, Franklin, what kills me...
And by the way, that's a very Republican idea the last 20 years.
Not from the national level. We're all for having standards, but whenever we tried to enforce standards on a local level, we had the national people, the liberals, come in and go, we don't like your standards.
Now, John,
we want to cram our standards down your throat.
The TCAP process was
I'm not
really
a big fan of the TCAP process.
It may be, but it was certainly championed by George W. Bush out of Texas.
It may have been.
And that was the primary motivator for it.
Unlike you, I'm willing to criticize our people who do stuff I don't agree with.
Were you that critical of it when he was the one promoting?
I wasn't a big fan of No Child Left Behind.
There was not a big, huge
When I saw that Ted Kennedy was involved, I wasn't that happy with it.
There wasn't a big uproar from the Republican
Franklin,
Party
when there's only one mathematician on the Common Core curriculum course, and he's from MIT, as I remember it, and he says that it's a horrible math course, and he refuses to sign off on it, and they vote and pass it through anyway, there's a problem. There was a problem with only having one mathematician on it. And here's what I get on this. You and I graduated from Bradley High School in 1980. I had Lily Frank Fitzgerald taught me pre-college English. There were amazingly about 34 of us in the class. I don't know how we learned anything over 19 kids in the class, but Lily Frank had over 30 of us in the class. And somehow over the last 150 years, America, without Common Core, has been able to produce the leadership of the world, because somehow we were able to figure out, learning English, learning math, learning history, and learning science would make us competitive. Now, for example, I go up, just 2 weeks ago, I go up to Walker Valley, and I'm talking to the people helping shape my son's class structure. And I'm informed that he can't take Chemistry 2 because they didn't have enough kids scheduled or willing to take Chemistry 2 for the class to make. And I take that back. They didn't have a teacher. That was it. They didn't have a teacher that they could spare to teach Chemistry 2. But guess what? He's got home ec, so they can teach him how to fry an egg. Now, I'm thinking that most parents are qualified to teach their children how to fry an egg or wash the clothes, but most of them are not qualified to teach them chemistry. So if you're asking me where should our resources be placed, I think it might be better to have a teacher teaching chemistry than teaching how to fry an egg. But who am I? I'm not on the Common Core Curriculum Committee.
I think we ought to put you on there, John. That makes sense.
Well, that's what bothers me is look, teach math, science, English, and history. Teach those four things, and our kids will kick every kid in the world's butt when it comes to competition.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the new things I know that's going on in the schools now is robotics. That's getting to be a big thing. They're teaching
we invented
more and more.
It without Common Core.
Yeah.
And by the way, none of your kids... This really blows my mind. You start looking in... really right now, but even if you look 10 years down the road, when they go to sign their name, they're going to look like Elmer Fudd's signature from the 1850s because they're not being taught to write in cursive, which means they won't be able to sign their name like we have traditionally signed our names.
They're going to be trying to text it.
No, they're going to write it in block. It's going to look like a first grader with a number 1 pencil wrote your name on the loan form that you're borrowing your mortgage from the bank with.
So
Franklin's trying to find out whether I'm right about the one math teacher on the Common Core. He's been Googling for about 10 minutes now.
Actually, I'm looking up what standards are in Tennessee for things like math and so forth.
My problem is not what I'm getting at, Franklin, is I think, like, for example, multiculturalism. If you ask me, now keep in mind, I came from a science background. I'm a dentist. I knew in high school that I had to be able to make good grades in science courses in college. But if you ask me what's more important, teaching multiculturalism or teaching 4 years of science, 4 years of math, 4 years of English, math, science, English, more important than multiculturalism.
Yeah.
If you look on the state website that actually has the standards on it, what you're going to find is that broken down by grade, there's a series of things that kids are supposed to be able to do by the time they finish that year. So I'm looking at 6th grade math, for example, and it's things like they should be able to solve problems involving the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of mixed numbers. They should be able to locate positive rational numbers on the number line.
Now, Franklin,
these are standards
I understand,
that they
but
ought to be able to achieve. It doesn't tell you how you have to do it.
You probably don't want to talk about math, because the math sections, from what I'm reading, are uniformly opposed on the liberal side of the spectrum, the conservative side of the spectrum, the teachers, the parents, the students. The math section, from what I hear, is absolutely horrible. First off, it's word problems, the bulk of it. Now, when we took things, you had some word problems, and word problems do help you think, but apparently you can't even make sense out of these word problems.
My daughter is taking algebra in high school right now, and it's not primarily word problems, so I don't know what that's about. I've got
the tests they're going to have to take.
Well,
And by the way, the polling data on Common Core, it is very quickly going downhill. We've already had a state or two
because
pull
you're
out.
also getting a lot of silly nonsense, like saying that this is something to do with the United Nations and
well, folks,
all
when
this
you
kind
hear
of crazy
Franklin,
stuff.
a liberal, say something like silly nonsense, that's how he justifies big brother government coming in and cramming stuff down your throat, because you're too stupid to know what's in your best interest. So let Franklin and the good progressives tell you
in this
what
case
you should
happens
do.
to be the state of Tennessee, right?
No.
So now you're opposed
Common
to that.
Core, Bill Haslam agreed to it. I'm not happy with that.
Not only
there are
Republican
governors that are pulling out
all
of it right
over
now,
America
Franklin.
agreed
There are
to it.
governors pulling out of it. There are Democrat governors that are having qualms about
Because
this.
they got this kind of silly nonsense going on.
So they're all stupid, and we should let
no, I
10
don't think
guys
so.
in D.C.
But I think,
headed
but I
by
think all
Guess
too,
You
but I
tell
think
them
all
what's
too
right and wrong.
often they lack the spine to stand up and say the truth. And the truth is, most of this criticism is a bunch of lunatic nonsense. The United Nations
There you
is
go,
not
folks. If you don't agree
mandating
with
what your
Franklin
Bradley
and the
County Board of
progressives,
Education
you're a
does.
lunatic. So anybody that doesn't agree with
Progressive?
progressives like Franklin, you're a lunatic. That's why you should turn your life over to him. He'll tell you how to live.
You should turn it over to the Republican Party
No,
so you can go back
if
to
you turn it over to the Republican Party,
1845
they'll
again,
tell you to do
when
what you
things
think
were
is
all
best.
rosy.
Because we trust the public.
We had less government in 1845, and we all know life was much better.
It was better, Franklin.
It was a whole lot better.
Yeah.
We just needed electricity.
We all lived to an average of 50 years of age. We all died from horrible diseases.
But Franklin,
and most of us didn't have an
amazingly,
education.
all
It
of
was
the
paradise
things
on
that
earth.
you're mentioning right now were solved without Common Core and without big government. It wasn't until the 70s that you people crammed big government down our throat. And I don't know, that's when crime exploded. That's when illegitimate birth exploded. That's when illegitimacy exploded. Thank you, Franklin, for big government's help.
I see, John. And so that whole Great Depression thing, that was paradise too, because that was pre-big
Called
government,
economics,
right?
and it went away. And as a matter of fact, we've talked about
Yes,
this
it went away
before.
with the help of big government.
No, big government actually prolonged it for 7 to 8 years, according to most economic research now.
More far right-wing nonsense.
No, it's not far right. It
is.
I've brought the data in for you, Franklin.
It is. It's nonsense.
When he took office, unemployment was
living
dropping.
standards went up
After he
dramatically
put
in this country after the
FDR
Great Depression.
instituted his things, Franklin, it rose to 20% unemployment 7 years later.
Living standards went up dramatically in this country following the Great Depression and big government. Health
Only
went
because
up
of a war
dramatically.
and the production that it caused.
You
a
have
war,
electricity
which, by the way, your
in
Democrat
your home
president got us
because
into.
of big government you wouldn't have had beforehand. You have flood-free fields because of big government. I mean,
Oh, I
it's
forgot.
like you've
the internet.
forgotten
You're right.
everything you
Al
learned.
Gore invented the internet too, right, Franklin?
Yet another right-wing myth.
Franklin, he said it.
No, he did
Yes,
not,
he
John.
did.
He did not.
Where is Al Gore, by the way? Has anybody seen him, heard him? Where is he making money right now?
Oh, he's making money off global warming hysteria. Oh, by the way, there's a new study out that the troposphere, the lower troposphere, has not warmed in the last 26 years.
Yes, those glaciers are receding because it's
Actually,
colder.
Franklin, the ice pack grew by over 50% this past year.
On one end of the pole, it's disappearing on the other side.
Yes, Franklin, which is something I said
That's
2 years
because
ago
you don't
to you.
understand the
No,
difference
I
between
understand
climate and
exactly.
weather.
Here's what I understand, Franklin. The Earth tips
Are you
on its
arguing about the
axis.
weather now, Frank?
And when the Earth tips to one side, it faces the sun on that side more, and it faces the sun less on the side tipped away. That's what we said all
Then
along.
that should have happened every year,
It
John.
does
because
happen every year,
No, John, the glaciers don't recede every year.
Franklin. They grew
don't
on the other
rec-
side. Total ice pack grew. That's what we said all along. You all cherry pick. For example,
You all
you liberals, you progressives that are looking for another way to control American
Well,
life.
In the South, we call it y'all.
Let me give you an answer that, in theory, ought to appeal to John, but doesn't for some strange reason. Corporations all over America and all over the world are changing all of their policies and practices in response to global warming that they acknowledge is happening. That's your marketplace that you love at work.
Franklin,
But you don't believe the market
no,
because you think it's not accurate for
Franklin,
2% of the population.
Let me try and explain this to you. I don't know if you're
All
economically.
those geniuses that you think are who we ought to emulate are embracing the reality that the climate is changing.
No, Franklin,
Only
you're wrong. Let me explain this
the
to you. Let me
fringe
explain the
dwellers.
market to you. The market is in place to make money. So what they're reflecting is they're reflecting the political environment. When you've got the politicians saying that global warming is in place and we will give you tax incentives, we will give you good PR for this, of course they do it because it's the bottom line is all they're after. It doesn't mean that the science behind it is correct.
So you're saying now that American corporations have no interest in reality. They're only interested in tax breaks.
The reality,
That's it.
Here's the reality for a corporation. They're interested in making
And
money.
then you would also be
They're
the same
interested in
person that's
making
always
money.
telling us to give them more tax
Franklin,
breaks.
for example, let me give you an example. If the government, like they did, says you can't make a regular incandescent light bulb anymore, then companies will not fight that regulation. They'll go into the business of making compact fluorescent because that's where the money's at. That's how the market works. The problem is the government distorted the marketplace in the first place.
Yes, they also did that when they decided that Pintos had to not explode. Was that a bad thing, John?
Now, see, folks, what he did right there?
Was
now,
it-
think
no,
about
no,
that for
that's-
a minute.
it's
You
exactly
can't
right.
have a light bulb that cost a quarter
That's-
anymore. You
that's-
got to have a $7
that's-
light bulb
that's-
because
That's the
Pintos
same-
exploded.
That's the same thing they did when they decided that fuel economy standards should go up for cars. Was that a bad thing? Most people would say that was a good thing.
Franklin, here's how this would have worked. When gas prices went up, that's when people started demanding more efficient cars. The market would have fixed that. But the market would have fixed it without empowering a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C.
If
And
that
that's
were
what's
the
really
case,
important to
John,
you progressives.
If that were the case, John, then you wouldn't have had all those car companies spending hundreds of millions of dollars to avoid those standards
That's
going
because
up.
the standards were
That's
too
why
harsh,
we wouldn't
too
have
quick.
had, we wouldn't have had
They were too
hundreds
harsh,
of millions
too
of
quick.
dollars spent by credit card companies to avoid having to put a disclosure on your bill that says exactly how long it will take you to pay off that card if you just pay the minimum.
Well, Franklin, I'll be perfectly
market
honest.
does
Why
not
should
work as
why should a
efficiently as
company
you
have to
think it
do
does.
that? Why isn't the person using the credit card responsible for having some common sense?
Really?
Yes.
You'd have been able to do that calculation just like that?
Franklin, I did it in college. I
So
was
what
taught
you
it.
really no, that's great. I love that you.
You
said
know what,
that.
Franklin?
Because what you're
Can
really
you-
saying
can you-
is that you think it's perfectly okay for more sophisticated people to take advantage of other
Now,
people
here's the-
every chance they
Let me
get
explain-
if they can make a
Let me
buck.
explain what I'm saying
That's
to you.
exactly what
First,
you just
it-
said.
It is just like a progressive to talk about more sophisticated people because
Yeah,
you all
that's
always
exactly
think
right.
you're the more sophisticated person person who needs to save the rest of us from ourselves. And guess what? Hitler thought he was more sophisticated, and he saved Germany from the Jews.
You're actually opposing, John, giving people information so they can save themselves.
Hey,
Hitler
Franklin,
saved
let me
the
ask you something.
Jews
Let me ask you something,
under
Franklin.
the same thought process.
Real simple. We've got to go to a commercial break. But if I wanted to know how much it costs, couldn't I just ask? Would they tell me? That way, you don't have to go to all the extra costs and expense of having a 10-page document printed for a little credit card.
One page is all you. I don't get 10 pages from my credit card company. I get one.
Can I just ask? Can I just ask how much it's going to be? Wouldn't that be simpler?
No, you can't be expected to have a brain.
If I want to know how much it's going to cost me to borrow $100, can I just ask?
Steve, you need a government bureaucrat to protect you from yourself.
Let's take a break.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. The cash you need is closer than you think.
Get an auto title loan today for up to $2,500 at Check Into Cash.
You drive home with the cash in your pocket.
Visit Check Into Cash for an auto title loan today, or get a payday advance for up to $425. Call toll-free 877-262-CASH. Title loan amount determined by value of car and ability to repay. Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Did you know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject? Tax refund checks, government checks, payroll checks, and many more. And when you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off your next purchase. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail. So stop by one of our 11 locations or visit us online at usmoneyshops.com.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some restrictions may apply. See store for details.
Wheeler Technologies has moved. Visit them at their new location at 490 Grove Avenue Southwest next to Bradley Rentals. Same great folks, same great service with a better location to serve you. Call Wheeler Technologies for voice, data, and security needs at 664-TECH. That's 664-8324. And remember, depend on Wheeler Technologies for the current time and temperature every day at 476-1111. Tennessee Alarm Contractor C1750.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Ah, the sounds of summer. If you had a pool, from Matthews Pool and Spa Company, 902 Sahara Drive in Cleveland, Tennessee. Call them at 423-476-4521 and get the pool or spa of your dreams. Do it now, Cleveland. Locally owned and operated for over 25 years right here in Cleveland, Tennessee, with over 75 years of total experience in the installation of pools and spas. So check out Matthews Pool and Spa for your new pool, spa, or any accessories you may need for a pool or spa you already have. Check them out here in Cleveland on Sahara Drive, 476-4521. Look out, kids, I'm going to jump. Woo!
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on WOOP FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, welcome back, folks. Anyway, we've had some great conversation this morning about different subjects, but we do have to talk about the strategy that we need to deal with ISIS. But first of all, let me take a call. We got a call. Let's take one. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Bobo.
Yo.
I want you to calm down, man. You're gonna have a heart attack.
Hey, now I've sat back here and just been quiet this whole deal. I hadn't said but just one or two things.
You haven't been quiet, you rascal. I've been listening. You get in them shouting conversations with John and Franklin.
I just got to let it all out silently.
I know, but I just want you to calm down. I don't want you blowing a gasket.
All right, you got a question for us this morning?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Let's talk about the new VA home a little bit here in Cleveland.
Well, I've never heard of, I hadn't heard about VA since the last scandal Obama had.
Look out now.
Huh? What? We got so many scandals going on now, we can't keep up with them. They're telling me the news moves so fast that it helps Obama because we just go from one crappy thing to the next.
Well,
but we keep the crappy base of
but
it
we
all.
keep the crappy base going.
I know, but what I was interested in is just asking a question about either of you heard anything about what the progress is on the VA home there in Cleveland?
Last I heard about it, it was basically in a hold status.
Well, and from 1 year to this most recent year, we went down on the list, from what I understand, of priority.
Mm-hmm.
John, you might know more about this than I do, actually, but is it, this veterans home, is it actually part of the VA system?
No,
I don't think it
is.
It
has nothing to do with that, I don't think. I will say, and now keep in mind, I'm chairman of the board of the Bradley County.
All right, hold on, caller, I'm going to go ahead and let you hang up unless you got another question.
Okay, Doe.
Thank you, man.
I am chairman of the board of the Bradley County Healthcare and Rehabilitation Center. I didn't understand, and I've said this a time or two, and I got kind of rebuked rather quickly. I don't understand why we don't, if they really wanted to build something, build a wing off of the Bradley County Healthcare, build a veterans wing, which would, I think, be more cost effective. Now, I don't know. They're talking about this is not a home for veterans in Bradley County, although veterans in Bradley County obviously would be able to go. But they're going to bring people in. They put these around the state, and they're going to bring people in. But I just never completely understood the idea of a completely standalone. I will tell you, nursing homes are having a tough time right now across the board, nationwide, because of some new standards. In Tennessee, for example, there's a thing Governor Bredesen put in place called the Choices Program. Now, like typical government, it was sold, we're going to make some money available if you want to keep mom or dad at home. We don't want you to have to put mom or dad in a home if you don't want to. That's the feel-good way it was sold. What it's actually become is they've changed the standards for getting into a nursing home, and they've made it very difficult for patients to get in. So it's not you can keep dad at home if you want to. It's you got to keep dad at home because we're not going to let him go to the nursing home. We had a patient that was in the nursing home for like a year and a half, 2 years. He had to go to the hospital over the weekend, which is pretty standard. Periodically they'll have an incident and they have to go back. When he got finished with his 3 days at the hospital, we couldn't get him readmitted back into the nursing home that he had been in for a year and a half. They said, well, he's not sick enough to be in the nursing home. He needs to go back to his home. Well, his family couldn't take him home. So that's how the Choices Program has actually worked. So I've been skeptical of whether there's enough business out there, enough patients out there to fill a veterans home. Now, I don't know, Franklin, I think he and I, neither one know. I don't know how it works. I don't know how the admissions pool is, so I'm unfamiliar with that.
I don't either. I got to say, what John said initially there seems pretty logical to me. So I don't know.
I don't know either. But,
I don't know. I know it's a dicey thing to talk about because it sounds like you're anti-veteran somehow, and it's not.
It has nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
we're a licensed
veterans home. The American Legions ought to put up the veterans homes. That's who ought to have the veterans home. It'd be a perfect location.
Well,
add-ons.
It'd be more attractive because you got a bar you can go to.
That's right. They can go get them a bite to eat, get them a beer. Anyway, let's talk about VA hospitals. I've said this from day one. I used to call on hospitals a lot. I have never understood why we have VA hospitals. I really don't understand why we have VA hospitals.
Well, it started after the war, the Great War, with, we had a huge influx and they needed to be able to treat those people. But it probably, and this is, you've had a lot of Republicans talk about this, you could deal with this through a voucher system with the current hospitals. And, a veteran gets a voucher.
That's right. I mean, we have so many problems with the VA right now. The VA is it's a mess. I mean, if we've got something messed up, I believe it's the VA right now. And I really think the best thing we could do, instead of trying to fix the thing that's already there, the monster that's been created, I'd say destroy the monster and let's start all over with the voucher system or something. But there's a lot of hospitals. Erlanger, you've got a lot of major hospitals.
And they're having problems too,
and
which it would help them.
And it would help everything. I think it would be a cost savings on health care overall.
I think there's merit to looking at that. I mean, I know how the system came about. Right. If you think about it, it was created in a time when much larger numbers of our veterans lived in rural areas that didn't have access to significant hospitals, and certainly not hospitals that would have any specialized skill dealing with war injuries and
but
so
Franklin,
forth like that. That's the way it came about.
This is an ideological argument you and I have all the time.
No, I'm agreeing with you on this.
Government never goes away. That's the problem with the government program. You're right. But what you're actually saying is, I don't know, things have changed. And government should maybe react to that change.
And there's a role to be played because, as we're already seeing, because of improvements in medicine and battlefield technology and so forth, we have a whole new class of veterans who are coming back, who are surviving, who would not have survived previously with far more serious conditions. And there may be some specialized care that they need that most local hospitals aren't prepared to provide.
I bet you.
But there's probably a way to deal with that.
I bet you there is no specialized service that a veteran may need that someone else doesn't need that has not been in a war.
Well, the numbers are greater.
The numbers
may be greater, but I'm thinking
traumatic brain injuries in huge numbers.
And by the way, folks, let me
amputations.
This will get me in trouble, but let me just say one of the reasons that our traumatic brain injuries are surviving at a much greater rate is that the Army has done studies on cats. And most of the animal rights people have pitched a fit because they're pretty unpleasant studies. They involve shooting the cat, anesthetizing them and shooting them and studying them. But that is where all of our breakthroughs have come in traumatic brain injury. And that's even though the Army did it because they had a lot of traumatic brain injury, it has benefited our children when they have their car wrecks, our grandparents when they have their car wrecks. So you got to be real careful what you get all whipped up about because there are benefits that sometimes you don't think about.
All right.
Well, before we switch to your next topic, I have to share a text that I got from a local teacher who was apparently before class listening to the first half of our.
Oh, good. Welcome, teachers. All teachers are welcome.
And the teacher sent me this message. It says, oddly, I won't be teaching home ec today. I will be doing a lesson about finding research resources for first graders as they begin a project on American symbols and landmarks. Darn Common Core.
We got a caller. Let's take a call real quick. Never mind. Missed him. Anyway, my next question, I've been saving this one, is we don't have a strategy for ISIS.
Well, we don't have the strategy for ISIS in Syria yet. That's for sure.
We have no strategy.
No, that's not true. It's not true.
Well, let's get into it.
Well, let's do.
I'm going to let y'all talk about this.
Well, first of all,
be quiet. Get the gloves out.
First of all, I'm going to say something to you. There is a serious problem there that's going to require a serious response to it.
How about a bomb?
And hold on, and it's something that we're going to have to get right.
Oh my God! I can't believe you're doing this Democratic talking point. He's spending time to make sure he gets it right.
Jubilating.
It's not. And here's the thing. In order to do this effectively and not just have the result of breeding a whole new generation of terrorists.
What about a beer summit?
Well, that might help too.
Hadn't he been doing it right for the last 5 years? And has terrorism gotten better or gotten worse, Franklin?
In some cases, yes.
Better or worse? Terrorism's better or worse?
Well, we haven't had any terrorist attacks in the United States.
Well, tell that to the Sotloff family. Tell that to the Foley family. How many more journalists? They got a woman now that they're saying they're going to behead next.
That's another example.
Make sure the president can sit and watch that and then go golf.
Guess what?
And go to fundraising instead of figuring out what strategy we do need.
We could have solved that one just like the Europeans did.
How's that?
They financed ISIS. They've been sending them tens of millions of dollars in ransom payments to avoid this happening to their citizens. We've said, no, we're not going to do that. Now, which one of us was right about that?
Franklin?
I would say we are.
This is a brutal bunch of...
I agree with you, John.
No, let me explain this to you. They don't understand anything. There is no great strategy needed. Here's what needed to happen. First off, over a year ago, in every daily briefing that the president got, ISIS was listed as a threat. It was listed as a serious threat. We have now found out that he has been told this every single day for over a year.
Let's talk.
And then he came out a month ago and said, oh, we were blindsided by this.
Let's talk
He could have
about-
bombed them when they were first coming across the border, but he didn't back in January.
Now here's what John is actually saying, first of all. Let's go back to the roots of this. And this is why this is complicated. ISIS is fighting Assad in Syria. We supposedly support people who are fighting Assad in Syria. This is part of the argument. When the Republicans were screaming that we needed to provide weapons and more support to the rebels in Syria, the question was, who are you providing it
Franklin,
to?
when we
Oh, wait,
first
there's
started
more. Wait,
saying
it
you
gets
could-
far more
you- no, no,
complicated.
you
It
could
gets
have
far more
identified them
complicated
then.
than this.
Franklin,
in
the guy
Iraq
is
right now,
dithering while
in
Rome
Iraq,
burns.
in Iraq, the Iranians are helping to fight ISIS now. Who are we supporting here? It's not clear. That's one of the problems. What the president's doing, and by the way, I will say it's the right thing, is forcing our allies, not only in Europe, but our allies in the Middle East, to come to the table and participate in this solution. Because if we can't do this by ourselves, and all we'll be doing is creating more enemies for ourselves unless we make them
Franklin,
participate.
I hate to break it to you. There are enemies no matter what. He has been babying these people, apologizing to these people for 6 years, and the only people in the world who won't admit that the world is a worse place now after 6 years of his leadership are liberals like you. Even the liberals at the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post say this guy is completely out of touch.
He's doing exactly what needs to happen here.
There was a letter to the editor last week by a couple of retired servicemen. This is not hard, folks. When they first off, I'm not even going to talk about the fact that he could have bombed them 8 months ago when they were in the desert in northern Iraq, when the Iraq government was asking us to bomb them. But once again, this guy dithers. His way of dealing with something is to do nothing. But let's just drop that. When they beheaded the first guy, Franklin, we should have unpacked the napalm from Vietnam. We should have gone over there. We should have lit up hundreds of square miles of their territory. Then we should have flown the gunship in that puts out a bullet every square foot. We should have mowed down about 10,000 of them. And when they make their little statement that if you keep bombing us, we're going to behead another journalist, by God, we say, we killed 10,000 of you. You behead another journalist, we're going to kill 20,000 next. That's what these people would understand. But that would require a president who has a spine.
I thought this was the junior varsity.
And you think that
I thought this was the
and
junior
you think
varsity.
that the president has the authority to do that, John?
Well, frankly,
do you? I'm asking you a question. Do you think that?
I'm glad you brought that up, Franklin.
And that's a yes or no question. Do you think he does or does not?
Well, he says he does in Iraq.
I ask you what you think.
He says he does in Iraq.
Wait a minute. It
What do you
depends
think?
whether Eric Holder's got anything to do with it.
Do you think that, John?
If Eric Holder's got anything to do with it,
I mean,
he can do anything he
I have
wants.
watched a dozen Republicans in the last 2 weeks go on television and say that the president does not have the authority without their approval. Which is it?
Franklin, he actually has authority to do it in Iraq by his own admission. He is doing. By the way,
But these journalists are not in Iraq; they're in Syria.
Franklin, in January of this year, the ISIS crossed the border into Iraq. Iraq requested that we bomb the crap out of him, and he didn't. That's when he was on the TV news calling them the JV team. He had requests for over 8 months to bomb them in Iraq.
Do
in
you
Iraq, not
support
Syria.
what all the Republican leadership says, which is that he doesn't have that authority? Which is it?
You know, Franklin, I hate to break this to you.
You're not breaking
this
anything
is
to me,
not
John.
politics.
You're being a hypocrite,
These
like you're
people
always
are killing
doing with
us,
this
Franklin,
president.
and you're defending this president rather than admitting he has done nothing. By the way, Franklin,
Why don't you admit that your
minority
party
'cause
hasn't gotten anything
the-
right in 20 years, and you've screwed up this and created this mess, and now you're pissed off because somebody else hadn't solved it for you.
We screwed it up.
Him and Eric Roberts think it's Bush's fault.
Really? Let me ask you this.
Let's blame Bush
Let me
for
ask
some
you
more.
this.
Let's blame Bush again.
Okay, let's do that. Was Iraq a stable country before the Republicans were in charge?
It was a stable country when Bush left. It was a stable country when Bush left.
No, it wasn't.
This president wasn't able to secure a status of forces agreement, and that's what allowed this to lose. Now, Franklin, let's say I give you your argument that Bush sucks and we shouldn't have been in there.
I don't care if you
we
give
were
it
already
to
in
me,
there,
John, because
Franklin.
you know what I'm saying.
We were
is
already
true.
in there,
You're
and
not
it was
giving me
stable.
anything,
It was
John.
stable.
I'm taking it from
was
you because
stable,
of all the
Franklin.
ridiculous
Franklin.
policy your party follows. The problem is you don't ever think about the long term. You think if we pull the trigger, everything will be glorious.
Well,
in fact, you've created this mess, and now somebody else has got to come in and try and clean it up.
Well, let me say something. I will agree with you on this. If you don't do nothing, there'll be something else happen. That's for damn sure. That is what our president's strategy is. His strategy is do nothing, do nothing, do nothing. Let's go play golf. Let's have a beer summit. Let's do nothing.
Franklin?
I lost the sound there.
Nothing.
Franklin, there are 6,000 students in the United States whose visas have expired that we can't find. Guess what the common thread was of the 19 hijackers that bombed us on 9/11? They were here on unexpired visas. 6,000 unexpired visas in the United States that the State Department has lost track of. And guess what else? Let's say only 10% of those are possible terrorists. That's 600 possible terrorists inside the United States.
Are we safer
That's
now
under
than we
this
were?
guy's leadership.
That's revisionist history
Are
at
we,
its
are we
finest.
safer now than we were?
We actually knew
Are you
where these
okay
people
with
are.
6,000 unexpired?
We knew where these
Oh my
people
God,
were.
Franklin, these people are cutting our damn heads off, and you can't figure out to quit defending this guy who even the New York Times says is out of his element.
John, you can disagree with the president if you want, but you're
I
not going to
am
make up
worried
your
that
facts.
someone's going to blow my children up because this guy can't pull his head out of his butt or can't quit
and
doing
you're not,
fundraisers.
and you're not getting off the hook on this when the facts are that the
Franklin?
Justice Department, when Bush was president, knew these guys were down there taking those aviation lessons for how to take off a plane but not land them, and they didn't do anything about it.
Here, let me kill that
and
argument
that
for
wasn't
you.
a Democrat, that was a Republican.
You're right. I'm not being partisan.
Yes, you
Bush
are.
screwed up. This guy's screwing up now. We're seeing it in real time. Help us fix it. Quit defending him. Quit. I'm not defending Bush.
Are we
Quit
safe?
Why don't
defending
you
Obama.
get your party off the sidelines and go to the White House and say, Mr. President, we back you doing these things instead of taking
doing
these
what
pot
things?
shots.
Doing what things, Franklin?
That's what.
Tell me what
the
things.
very
I'm sorry.
Republicans you were just criticizing
you
were
apparently
doing.
haven't seen these bombs that have been going off over there that we've been dropping.
Franklin,
You
we are
apparently
dropping,
didn't read about
You're missing the point. We're dropping targeted little. Oh, we blew it. We sent a missile here. We should be carpet bombing these people.
Do we have the legal authority to do that, John? Right now, answer the darn question.
Yes, we do.
What's
Franklin.
the difference in the
Fine.
carpet bomb?
Jen
Get
Psaki,
your-
the
then get
president.
Then get
Jen-
your people off the sidelines and have them go
Franklin.
and see.
Do we have the authority to
Jen
watch our borders
Psaki,
look like?
the president's spokesman with the State Department, said that everything he was doing in Iraq was authorized through the War Powers Act. He had complete authority to do it, and he was in full cooperation.
Problem
Then
is,
guess what? No, wait a minute. Here's the
bigger
best part,
problem
Franklin.
is in Syria, not Iraq.
You're not listening to me. Here's the best part about that. When she admitted that everything he was doing was legal under the War Powers Act against ISIS in Iraq, when James Rosen, the Fox News correspondent, said, then are we at war with ISIS? She refused to say. Now think about that.
That's because
We're using
there is no War Powers
we're using the
resolution
War
to fight
Powers
ISIS.
Act to bomb ISIS, but we won't say we're at war with ISIS.
The War Powers Act that you're referring to doesn't even mention ISIS.
Franklin, let me just do this point by point. Did the president say we have no strategy? I'm going to give you. Did he say we have no strategy
John,
in Syria?
He did.
Do you think this weekend he should have spent less time at the 3 fundraisers that he did, or more time developing a strategy?
Well, this
Which
weekend
would have
the
been
president
better?
spent in
3
Europe,
fundraisers,
John.
Franklin. He just left for Europe. Over the weekend, this past weekend, he did 3 fundraisers for the Democratic Party. Should he have done those fundraisers, or should he have been, I don't know, in the Situation Room putting together a strategy? Which would have been better?
The strategy is to bring our
Franklin,
allies
you're not gonna
and
answer the
friendly
question, are you?
Arab nations into the fight.
You're not
and
gonna
that's
answer
the
that
only
question,
way
are you?
we can succeed.
By the way, Franklin,
I don't really
73% of the voters say they are completely concerned that we have no strategy. But he chose to do 3 fundraisers over the weekend. 3 fundraisers. So golf and fundraisers are a higher priority than developing the strategy.
Where is Eric Holder today when you need him?
What does Eric Holder have to do with what's going on in the Middle East?
Well, every time we have a screwed up
Every time
problem,
they
he
behead
sends Eric
someone,
Holder to
they
straighten
send
it
the
out.
FBI, which is under Eric Holder, because instead of saying this is a terrorist act of war, they say it's a criminal investigation.
Because that's the only authority they can utilize at this point.
Franklin, at the point when they now have seized airliners in Syria. They have access to commercial airliners. There is nuclear material that has gone missing in Kazakhstan right now. You have Saudi Arabian kings saying they could attack Europe and the United States within 2 months.
That's right, because here's the problem. These Saudi Arabian governments the Saudi Arabian government you're talking about wants the U.S. to come in and do this unilaterally. And that's the problem. We will create more problems for ourselves down the road unless we make some of these Arab governments participate in this process. It can't just be.
That is such a silly sentiment.
No, it's not.
How long have we been fighting Muslims?
You're exactly right, John. But we haven't made these other people come in and work with us.
1803.
The fact is that what we need is more Arab boots on the ground with us, so that it's.
I
not
didn't say
just
boots
us
on the
being
ground.
targeted.
I said light them up.
Well, because all the military experts have weighed in and said can't do this with just air.
Really, Franklin, is that why the leaks are coming out of the Defense Department and the intelligence community, because they're tired of being scapegoated by this president? Is that why? He absolutely scapegoated them all the time, because he is completely
What are you talking about? He hasn't said anything negative about our military capability.
He said the reason he hadn't acted on ISIS is because he didn't have the intelligence. Well, that's why the leak came out from a former intelligence authority that said it's been in his daily briefing every day for over a year.
And here's the thing. Like a couple of months ago, when apparently we staged a commando raid on ISIS based upon our intelligence to try and free one of these journalists. Unfortunately, the journalist wasn't there because the intel was bad. Is that what you're talking about? But guess what? The president didn't. The president.
If you want to talk about that, the president released that information against the recommendation of the entire intelligence community. He probably put all the assets at risk, but he did it to protect his political interests. That's the problem here. He is more focused on his political interests than protecting the United States of America.
That's a good point, though, John, because what that really means is all those Republicans who had access to that intel were on TV criticizing him for doing nothing, which means that they were lying.
Frankly, they criticized him for not doing enough.
They were lying when he said he wasn't doing anything.
Oh my God, Franklin!
In fact,
he
was doing something, but they decided to politicize.
These people, Franklin, are going to attack us. This president is doing everything he can to make the scene right for that. And when it happens, I hope you can at that point say, maybe I was wrong and this guy was out of his league.
I hope your party will eventually come to the stage of once again trying to think of ourselves as Americans instead of Republicans.
Well, he only thinks of himself as a Democrat. Because if he had been an American, Franklin, he wouldn't have been at a DNC fundraiser over the weekend. He would have been in the Situation Room protecting Americans instead of protecting the fundraising of the Democrat Party. So don't talk to me about being an American.
We have a 100-year tradition in this country.
This man is a political hack who is not interested in anything
your
but
party
himself.
hasn't done anything but smear in the last 8 years.
The guy's a loser who's out of his element,
Franklin, and he's going to kill
Shameful.
us. He's going to kill us, and you are enabling him. You are an enabler along with all the other progressives
That's right.
who will not say this guy is wrong.
When we put all that extra effort in the first 4 years into attacking the terrorists in Pakistan
Franklin,
and Afghanistan,
anybody scared of us?
You guys were criticizing him
the
for that.
UAE and Egypt actually did air raids without
tell you what.
even notifying the U.S. government because we don't even matter in the district anymore.
I'll tell you what, if we don't move quickly, Putin's going to be
This
in
guy will
charge.
not move
That's all I
quickly.
got to say. Bye-bye. See you
Except
next
to a
week.
fundraiser.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.